France is no ordinary country. From its inception in 1792, France has evolved into a multicultural society of 64 million people and has influenced cultures around the globe. Apart from being the largest country in the European Union, France's economy is ranked as the 7th largest in the world, cementing its geopolitical and economic influence across the globe. Its capital, Paris, is a bustling cosmopolitan city of about 12 million people. It attracts around 7 million visitors annually to sample its tourism. It is here where the Global Financing Pact Summit was held from June 22nd to 23rd, 2023. President Hichilema was among world leaders expected to attend the summit. The president arrived in the French capital Paris in the early hours of June 22nd, in time for the opening ceremony at the prestigious Palais Bonnard. The summit was organized by French President Emmanuel Macron and attracted several world leaders, financiers from multilateral lending institutions, philanthropists, climate change activists, and other stakeholders. They converged on the French capital to consider debt restructuring for many of the world's poorest nations. During the summit, the United Nations observed that poor nations were becoming poorer and called for a new financial system to aid the development of poor countries.
The financial system, internationally speaking, is in a crisis. Halfway to the deadline of the 2030 program, the Sustainable Development Goals are slipping ever further away. Every day. Even the most basic goals about hunger and poverty are slipping back after decades of progress. Yes, today in 2023, more than 750 million people do not have enough to eat, and tens of millions of other people are falling into extreme poverty. The COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine have made things worse. Rich countries were able to generate the necessary cash flow to get their economies started again. But on the contrary, developing countries don't have that capacity and have to face up to abusive loan prices that are up to 8 times higher than developed countries must pay. Many leaders must face a truly difficult choice, either to service their debt or to meet their population's needs. Many African countries today are spending more money to spend their debt than for healthcare. And this will have terrible consequences for entire generations.
The summit was critical to Zambia as the United Party for National Development, UPND administration, had been seeking debt relief to reignite the country's economic transformation agenda. Zambia's quest for a debt restructuring deal was secured at the summit after a series of engagements with various stakeholders.
On behalf of our people of Zambia, to thank greatly the achievement that was scored yesterday. One of the deliverables for this summit, and President Macron is aware, I came down here and requested that, obviously also the President of China, that we should ensure that by the time this summit takes place, we'll have delivered the Zambia debt restructuring project. This is one of the deliverables at this summit. Thank you to China. Thank you to France for chairing the G20 framework. Thank you to South Africa for being the deputy chair for this process, and also to all of the countries that in one way or another supported this process to reach the conclusion it did and the benefit it would deliver to other debtor countries, because Zambia was more or less used like a guinea pig. And we are now in this situation, and we hope that the lessons of that process can be learned and learned correctly and be applied to the other processes that will commence starting, I believe, following this summit. I must give special thank you to the US government for their support, European Union for their support. Indeed, most of us as debtor countries also were speaking to each other, learning from each other. Thank you very much. Let me move quickly to the issue of, I can't forget creditors. Creditors. Thank you so much to the creditors, all of you, diversified as you are. Obviously, some are large, some are smaller, but without your cooperation, this was not going to be possible. But I must also say thank you to the people of Zambia for their patience. We took this project as one of our responsibilities before we formed government as an opposition party, that debt restructuring was a critical deliverable for us. And the people of Zambia were very patient, extremely patient, pain on the other side because of the structural adjustment, the structural processes. And if there's one lesson that I want to share with other countries, that leadership is crucial at a country level. To be clear of what you want and say so to your people. The people may not support everything that's necessary. Institutional reform, consumption expenditure controls. I dare say habits of corruption are enjoyed by many in our countries. And when you put reforms, you confront them as well. But it's important to be intentional as leaders and then deliver that to our communities. They will go through the pain, but they will support you, as Zambians have done that.
President Hichilema observed that there was need for rich countries to increase resources for climate-smart development.
Poverty, climate change. We have already argued that these are intertwined. There's no question about it. Let me draw the first aspect of the connection. Even before we talk about financing, new financing, more financing, when countries are not growing economically, you cannot expect a poor person to carry an additional burden. That is necessary to drive growth, to drive development. So poverty actually exacerbates the climate change mitigation measures, I argue. And it's very clear. If you are asking your poor people to switch energy sources, can they afford from charcoal to cleaner energy? They're already stressed. So we need to find mechanisms to support the poor in our countries, the less privileged, to be able to come through to support the changes that are required to mitigate climate change negative effects. I think that's very, very important. It's also true to say climate change on the flip side has imposed new obligations on the less privileged. For example, a farmer you saw, a farmer you went to visit, before they could on 1 hectare produce, 2 hectares produce enough for themselves and an excess for sale. But climate change measures have made it one season, the same rain season, one part of it is a drought. When the rain comes, it's a flood. One season. What chance does that farmer have? They absolutely don't have. So as we talk about climate change mitigations, financing, support, technology, farming methods, issues of genetics in agriculture, early maturing varieties, I'm just giving an example, context, are important to consider. So it's not just laying the resource envelope on the table. It is digging inside that envelope. How do we apply that envelope in order to take care of the challenges that have arisen from climate change?
During the summit, climate change activists called on global leaders to be accountable for the damage to the planet's environment and the need for increased investment.
As you are considering a new finance pact, it must be a pact that supports an equitable fossil fuel phase-out in conjunction with an equitable renewable energy phase-in. As the COP28 president, Sultan Al-Jaber, recently said, a phase-out of fossil fuels is inevitable. With the right decisions here, you can help make the inevitable happen now. People outside this summit are suffering and dying. The UN Secretary General is right. Wasting any new money on new coal, oil, and gas is moral and economic madness. So let's stop this madness. Let's put people above profit.
The global agenda today is to overcome and become more resilient to the crises that we are facing, to restore momentum to the Sustainable Development Goals and poverty reduction, and to act with the urgency needed on climate and nature. This requires investment on a major scale. This ramp-up is essential, not only for tackling climate, but to put us on a new path for global development, much more attractive than the dirty, destructive models of the past, one that is more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient.
The Zambian head of state also added his voice, calling for a holistic, actionable framework.
I like the spirit of partnership that I hear. I like what I hear from leaders, all of you who have spoken. I think that's the way it should be. But the thing is now to pull all this in one basket, draw an action plan, which is time-bound, and we get a job done. If the political leadership is there, business leadership is there, decisions are clear, we now need to get our technical people not to sit on the work that needs to be done. So supervision, monitoring is important. Lastly, and this is the last one really, I want to thank what I hear from the Chinese Premier, what I hear from Secretary Yellen, and indeed all the leaders that have spoken on the issue of conflict. We cannot achieve what we want to achieve if we allow our global community to focus time, resources, everything, technology, on conflict. I think there's a duty for us all to keep our individual countries peaceful, out of conflict, and not export instability to other countries, neighboring or far away. As we now know, instability anywhere is instability everywhere.
At the end of the two-day summit, groundbreaking resolutions were reached that would change the development status and economic fate of low-income countries.
During this summit, there were some very concrete things that we did. We had the 100 billion for climate financing that was finalized, another 100 billion for reallocation of special drawing rights that were promised in 2021, and I congratulate everyone who finalized those agreements here. We finalized a new fund for forests and nature ahead of COP28 that is meant to be doing roughly the same thing. That is to say, having the initiatives to preserve biodiversity and the revenues that they do be earmarked for them. We had initiatives for Zambia, and we had the conclusion for the just energy transition for Senegal as well. I'd also like to thank all of those who took part in those agreements. I won't go on at greater length, but there's a long list of other concrete objects. I think we can also say we finalized the shared roadmap, and I'd like to thank everyone who took part in that, and especially leaders of the World Bank and the IMF. This is a highly structuring element for the transformation of our landscape, with better coordination of the work that's done, new ambitions, and a new lever with the private sector that is of key importance.
During the closing ceremony of the summit, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz proposed for new strategic harnessing of value addition of resources from Africa to aid a new development process from the new financial architecture. The German Chancellor acknowledged the need for balance in utilization of rare resources, such as fertilizer materials, for the benefit of humanity as it pursues increased productivity.
I think discussing about fair development should include the idea of creating factories for fertilizers all over the globe so that we have a more resilient structure and that we can help many people to get there. So my view is we have to take our responsibility for the globe. We have to stick to our words, we have to walk as we talk, but if we do so, I think there's a good chance that we make our place a better world.
With the summit ended and debt restructuring mission achieved, President Hichilema engaged several renowned Western media to share Zambia's invaluable experience in debt management, among others.
Part of it is that this is a learning curve. Tell me which other common framework delivered a debt restructuring?
Chad and Zambia.
Failed.
Sorry?
Failed. I'm saying other than Zambia. The Chad one failed. Ethiopia hasn't done it. No one has done it. So this was like a pilot or a guinea pig situation. Mm-hmm. I think we expect that other debtor countries now will be able to run through their restructuring much quicker. I think that's important. So Zambia's pain can now assist others to do it better, because a world where we are making progress is good for all of us. It doesn't matter which country is involved.
The head of state took advantage of multiple press interviews to address misconceptions about Africa's peace initiative to end the Russia-Ukraine armed conflict that has dragged for months.
The war never stops through one meeting, but it's a building block. How can anyone say this is a diplomatic failure for African countries? There was an effort by the Turkish leadership. Did it yield end of the war? No. There was what was called the Minsk Agreement in Belarus. Document was signed. The war didn't end. Was that a failure? No. The Chinese have a process. Ukraine itself has a 10-point plan to allow steps towards the end of the war. All these are not failures, including the African effort. They are a package. They are activities that we can learn from what was not done properly. I mean properly, to connote not helping end the war. But we can learn from there and do it better. So Africa didn't go there to compete with France, to compete with China, to compete with Belarus or Turkey or Ukraine or Russia itself. We went there to make the case for peace. One, yes, we've talked about the exchange of prisoners. It was agreed. By the way, both parties agreed to exchange of prisoners. Would you call that a failure? Two, both parties agreed to return the children to their families. Would that be a failure? No. Both parties agreed that the trade routes, the Black Sea routes, the ports must be reopened, but they raised an issue. One of the parties did not like the fact that their fertilizer is not moving when the grain for another country is moving. We have to address that issue. The mission was able to establish the sore points. Success, yes. All of it, no. Building block, yes. So anyone describing this as a failure is really, I don't know where they come from. So, but the issue is, I mean, when I say when I say they come from, I don't mean physical location, but their mind. Where is their mind coming from? From which angle are they making that argument? We also agreed that we can exchange prisoners, we can take children back to their homes, we can basically do certain things now. If the war does not end in another 3-4 months, even a month from now, there will be need to exchange more prisoners. So we must work to ending the conflict, and we therefore coined what we call the road to peace. Both countries agreed to that. Number 3, both countries agreed to further engagements. Number 4, both countries agreed, with difficulties of course, different levels of challenges, agreed to the fact that all of these efforts now must be put together so that we can find peace, lasting peace, and ending the war. Every war has to come to an end, but it doesn't end by one visit. I do not understand anyone describing this. Maybe I have an idea where this is coming from. If there is to be an end to the war, Africans must not be the ones to do it. Africans are not looking for credit. Africans are looking for stability in the world so that we can focus our resources and time on the developmental ticket, on the debt issues, on poverty reduction, on food production. That's our interest.
Satisfied with the accomplishments in France, President Hichilema left the French capital and returned to Zambia to attend to other national matters.